Okay. All right, I guess that's what's going to happen. Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jennifer Dumoulin. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and Nandita, that's very kind of you. I'd like to thank the Humanities Graduate Students Association from York University for the opportunity to revisit the research that I'll be presenting today. I conducted this research last summer at the 50th anniversary of ComicCon, and it's nice to kind of pull it out of the box and get to re-examine it in the context of this conference. So the title of my presentation is Tattoos and Comics, the Uneasy Convergence of Two Cultures at ComicCon. Let's see if this works here. Okay, perfect. Essentially the plan for today on my hand is going to be discuss a little bit about what ComicCon is. If you've never been there before, I'll kind of provide you with an overview. Then I'll be talking about my research project and methodology and the findings and any other outcomes that have kind of stemmed from this project. Perfect. So ComicCon was founded in 1969. It originally started as a single day event. I was in the bottom of a hotel. It was very small. And it's grown into a multi-genre entertainment and comic book convention that takes place over the course of several days. When I was there last year, it was attended by more than 150,000 people. And the programming that takes place includes panels, seminars, there's an academic conference, there are workshops, previews of feature films and television programs, awards, there's a whole bunch of on-site and off-site experiences. There's all kinds of after parties and unpublished parties that take place at Comic-Con as well. So all that to say, there's a lot of diverse programming that takes place at Comic-Con International in San Diego and at many other cons. The research that I chose to investigate kind of sits at the intersection of fan culture and tattoo culture. And I chose to look at this because of the similarities between the two, in the sense that they both started as quite marginalized and have now become professionalized and much more mainstream. And so in order to conduct my research, I relied on two concepts: fandom culture, or comics fandom culture in particular, which I defined as a shared devotion to and enthusiasm for comics, science fiction and fantasy characters and stories as expressed by a community of individuals through similar practices, symbols, and behaviors. And then I also relied on the concept of a fandom or fan tattoo, which refers to the permanent depiction of a character, story, word, or phrase from an aspect of comics fandom culture on one's physical person in the form of a tattoo. Now, this is a very personal topic for me. I do research in the area of identity studies in the context of comics and science fiction and fantasy literature. And I also have several tattoos. At the time of my research, I had 14. Since then, I am now up to 16 with plans for several more. I put my graduate student funding to good use. And many of the tattoos that I have are fandom tattoos. So I felt very comfortable in this environment. My research was guided by two research questions. To what extent do fans express themselves with tattoos? And to what extent do local tattoo artists and tattoo parlors benefit economically from the con? Now, in order to conduct my research, I used ethnography. So ethnography is used to learn about the system of beliefs and values, as well as generally held assumptions about the way of life that is shared by a group of people. To do ethnography, generally speaking, ethnographic researchers collect cultural data in the form of observations, interviews, and artifacts. So during Comic-Con, I conducted more than 30 hours of observation on-site and off-site in the Gaslamp Quarter, which is where Comic-Con takes place. I did 17 interviews in total, and I also collected photographs of artwork from 4 different tattoo parlors. I was surprised by some of the assumptions that I had and some of the challenges that I encountered there. I assume that because I am so open about the tattoos that I have, and I'm always eager to discuss them, plus probably many years of watching Miami Ink and those kinds of reality television shows, that everybody would be open to discussing their tattoos as well. But I actually encountered quite a bit of resistance and hesitancy among Comic-Con attendees, when I asked them about it. I found that attendees often moved very quickly also with a specific time and time-sensitive purpose in mind. So they'd be running from one room to another over the con to attend different panels and events that were taking place, which meant that tattoos could be easily missed as people were literally running by you in Comic-Con, but also that people were hesitant to stop because they didn't want to lose their place in line or get stuck in line when they could have been at the front if they hadn't stopped to talk to you. Generally speaking, though, tattoos are infused with meaning. So they contain meaning to the person to whom they belong. They also convey meaning for the artist who designs them and to the audience and passerbys who interpret them. Well, there are many reasons why people get tattoos. I believe, and there is a significant amount of scholarly literature to support this, that every tattoo represents a snapshot in time that is significant to our life. And that when we look at a person's tattoos together, what we actually see is their life story. So I went into my research with these assumptions and with this kind of understanding. Now, in terms of my findings, what I did was I went around the tattoo parlors in the Gaslamp Quarter, which is the neighborhood where Comic-Con is located. And I assumed based on my experiences here in Ottawa and in other cities that I would see lineups down the street of people waiting to get comic-themed tattoos while they were at Comic-Con, or that I would see these signs up in windows announcing flash sales for specific comic-themed artwork. And I was really surprised to instead see very subdued Comic-Con signage on tattoo parlors. So 3 of the 4 parlors that I spent the most of my time in had only modest signs in their windows advertising a specific aspect of Comic-Con. There was a QR code kind of contest, and so that's what they had up in their windows. There were no flash sales, and there was actually a general apathy towards Comic-Con from the local tattoo artists. What I found out during the course of my studies was that Comic-Con isn't really a boon to the local industry, while other businesses like restaurants and hotels receive an immediate and direct economic benefit. Apart from a handful of regular and loyal clients who do happen to get a tattoo souvenir every year. According to one tattoo artist that I interviewed, people come for the con, not for tattoos. So no one comes to Comic-Con to spend $300 on tattoos when you can spend $300 on Funko Pop merchandise on the convention floor, essentially. There was one exception, which was the emergence of a tattoo referred to as the autograph tattoo. So most commonly this happened on Sundays after hours or even days of camping out and waiting in line to see your favorite artist or actor or character. People would get signatures on their person and then quite literally run down to a tattoo parlor to get that signature inked onto their body. And there's some health issues that kind of come around with that in terms of, you know, the ink of another pen getting into your skin. But those are the most common tattoos that were found. I also inquired about whether or not the tattoo artist would be interested in setting up a booth on the convention floor. And they felt that it would be impossible to keep up with the demand of tattoos at Comic-Con, but also too difficult to customize them because every single tattoo is different. There's no one would want a standard Star Wars tattoo or a standard Super Mario tattoo. Everybody would want something very specific. So that's one of the reasons why they don't go to Comic-Con conventions. Now, I also interviewed participants, there we go. And so even though Comic-Con attendees weren't coming to San Diego to get fandom tattoos done, many attendees did come with them, just like I did. And I have, there was a gentleman who had a Wonder Woman tattoo that when I was walking around in my Wonder Woman costume had to tell me about his Wonder Woman tattoo. Maud Garrett, who's on the screen here, was one of the panelists on Sci-Fi, The Wires. It came from the 90s program, and she was talking about her Zelda tattoo. There was someone that I encountered that had a Star Wars tattoo who she spoke about how it was a tribute to her father because they watched Star Wars together. Another attendee talked about her Beauty and the Beast tattoos and how she loves having them with her all the time. So even though people weren't getting them done, they did have them on their body. And what I found was because of the extremely personal nature of the bulk of the tattoos, it's not just a tribute to an artist or a film, but there's some deeper meaning behind it, like a connection with your family or a part of your life. That made people actually hesitant to talk about them, which is very different than, say, cosplay, which people display very proudly and are eager to talk about how they construct their costumes that they wear to Comic-Con. one participant actually told me that he was too shy and just kind of walked away when I was doing my interviews. So I thought this was really interesting, and I spoke with some of the vendors on the convention floor about this, especially the tattooed vendors that I could find. And some of them said that they would never get a comics tattoo, even though they were at Comic-Con and had fan tattoos based on their favorite heavy metal band. So it was really interesting to see this disconnect between a comics culture and the willingness to talk about it in some places. In terms of the finding, I think what the findings of this research project show is that both comics and tattoo cultures have had a similar path. So they both gained popularity, they've both become mainstream. And as that has happened, the two have intersected. Although tattoos and comics tattoos in particular in the context of this study are visible on our outsides, just like other aspects of comics culture, they are seen as for our insides, so for ourselves. And for that reason, for this deeply personal meaning that sits behind them, the tattoos literally and quite figuratively become a part of a person's identity. And it's for that reason that Comic-Con attendees, I think anyway, were reluctant or less likely to talk about the symbolism behind the tattoos, is that they're a bit more private. I also saw the emergence of kind of a subculture, I think a con subculture with regards to tattooed attendees and non-tattooed attendees that I think will be interesting to explore in further research. But I think ultimately my big conclusion is that the research that I've done suggests that there is some kind of cultural tension, or at least a cultural distinction between these tattooed and non-tattooed groups of attendees. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to questions and discussion at the end of the panel.